are watching A News. I'm Leila Masimova. Here's the top stories for today. Russia and Ukraine have agreed to halt military strikes on vessels in the Black Sea and pose attacks on energy infrastructure, as the White House reports. U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has taken full responsibility for the leak of sensitive details regarding a planned U.S. strike on Yemen. Kyrgyzstan has officially ratified a key border treaty with Tajikistan. A deal has been reached between American and Russian negotiators on ending military strikes against commercial vessels in the Black Sea. The White House says it believes progress is being made towards ending the conflict in Ukraine and that peace talks will continue. Our correspondent Obi Shabandar has more from Washington.
Following days of intensive talks in the Saudi Arabian capital of Riyadh, the United States, Russia and Ukraine have reached an agreement to ensure the safe navigation of commercial vessels in the Black Sea. The agreement will ensure that the vessels carrying grain and oil will not be targeted. As part of a deal negotiated between Moscow and Washington, the U.S. also agreed to help restore Russia's access to global markets for their agriculture and fertilizer exports, as well as lowering maritime insurance costs and enhancing Russian access to ports and payment systems related to transactions on the international markets. Russia's access to international markets has been severely restricted due to punishing American and European sanctions that were imposed following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In a statement posted by the White House on Tuesday, the Trump administration stated that the U.S. and Russia will further develop measures for implementing President Trump's and President Putin's agreement to ban airstrikes against energy facilities of Russia and Ukraine. The White House also announced that Moscow and Washington will continue to work towards achieving a durable and lasting peace in Ukraine. This deal is a result of separate negotiations that the U.S. held with Ukraine and Russia. It is widely viewed as a stepping stone towards peace talks between Kyiv and Moscow. U.S. officials will also continue to work in brokering exchanges of prisoners of war between Russia and Ukraine, the release of civilian detainees, and the return of forcibly transferred Ukrainian children held in Russia. Securing the safe navigation of grain and energy shipments from the Black Sea is expected to help stabilize impacted global supply chains, many of which are dependent upon grain, seed oil, and fertilizer exports from Ukraine and Russia. This will also be good news to developing countries that have been particularly hurt by rising global food prices due to the war in Ukraine. Ubi Shabander, A News, Washington, D.C.
U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has acknowledged creating a signal group chat where sensitive details about planned U.S. airstrikes on Yemen were leaked. While calling it embarrassing, he insisted that information shared was not classified.
We have our technical experts.
U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has taken full responsibility for the leak of sensitive details regarding a planned U.S. strike on Yemen. The information was shared in a signal chat with Trump administration officials and a journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic. Goldberg's report, published on Monday, revealed that sensitive details about the operation, such as target information, weaponry and attack sequencing, were posted in the chat ahead of the May the 15th airstrikes. Goldberg was invited into the encrypted messaging group Houthi PC Small Group on March the 13th and described the leak as a shockingly reckless use of the platform. The Atlantic article raised concerns over the exposure of crucial military details. During an interview with Fox News, Waltz confirmed his role in setting up the chat.
It's embarrassing, yes. We're going to get to the bottom of it. I just talked to Elon on the way here. We've got the best technical minds looking at how this happened. But I can tell you for 100%, I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is the bottom scum of journalists. And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone.
President Donald Trump says that no classified information was involved and expressed confidence in Waltz's performance as National Security Advisor. The White House has since confirmed that an internal review is underway and Trump was briefed on the matter. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who allegedly shared the operational details with Goldberg, dismissed questions about the leak, accusing the journalist of spreading misinformation. Hegseth defended the airstrike campaign, asserting that it was necessary to restore deterrence and secure freedom of navigation in the region. The leak drew sharp criticism from Democratic lawmakers who called for a congressional investigation into the potential breach of national security.
A serious security lapse in Washington made headlines after the Atlantic's editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg was mistakenly added to a Signal chat where Trump officials discussed U.S. airstrikes on the Houthis. The latest edition of NewsHour, our host Guy Schoen discussed the issue with Newsweek contributing editor Peter Roth. Let's listen in on what the expert had to say about this unusual breach.
I will say, as mistakes go, this is a butte, which leads the conspiratorial turn of my mind to wonder if it wasn't somehow planned. I can't see why they'd want to do that, but you know, there's a slight possibility that exists. But typically, something like this would be blamed on bad staff work. I mean, you don't really imagine the National Security Advisor to the President sitting down at his computer and assembling a group chat. That would be done by staff. And I suspect that what happened is that they wanted one Jeffrey Goldberg and got a different Jeffrey Goldberg. The interesting question here, and I'm not sure I'm the one to provide the answer, but I can certainly raise it. Are the journalistic ethics involved in Mr. Goldberg not announcing that he was on the call and identifying himself? I'm not sure that if I were in his shoes, I wouldn't have done that. If I wouldn't have said, you know what, you've got me in this chat, I'm not supposed to be here, I'm leaving, despite the fact that it's a chance for a good story. I'm not so sure that publishing this was the right thing to do.
Johan Carlson, international community for fast and broad sanction easing on Syria. Fragility and hope mark new era in Syria amid ongoing violence and aid struggles.
UN called for urgent international action to ease sanctions on Syria to overcome the immediate challenges towards recovery after the collapse of 14 years of Bashar Assad's regime. UN Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, told the Security Council that there is a need of economic future and international support for Syrians. Syrians need an economic future, he added, welcoming humanitarian pledges made at the 9th Brussels conference on 17th March to support Syria's recovery. However, observing that more resources will be needed, he also urged fast and broad sanctions easing. Tom Fletcher, Under-Secretary-General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, cited progress on the expanded cross-border deliveries and mentioned a need for member states to ease sanctions. At Security Council, Tom Fletcher urged decisive action to support people of Syria. Sanctions implemented by UN, EU and US against Syria have led to trade limitations, shortage of medical equipment, medical supplements and medicine, disruption of financial services and difficulties with international investments.
Turkey hopes to improve its relationship with the U.S. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan is in Washington for high-level talks with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio during a two-day visit. The meetings aim to strengthen bilateral ties and address key regional challenges.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington on Tuesday. The two-day visit follows a phone call between Donald Trump and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan that a top Trump aide described as transformational. Ties between both countries have drifted away from a strategic partnership in recent years. The trip comes as Ankara wants America to remove sanctions and let the country back into a crucial fighter jet program. Ankara is seeking a warming of ties with Washington under the new administration. Discussions will cover a range of regional issues, including the situations in Ukraine, Palestine and Syria, with an emphasis on exploring further opportunities for cooperation.
Joining us now live from Istanbul, Turkey, is Ambassador Matthew Bryce, former American diplomat, to discuss latest meeting between the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan.
Hello.
Hello. My first question to you would be, Ambassador, of course, a number of issues were touched upon during this meeting. Syria is one of the key subjects. Both sides emphasize the importance of engaging with Syrian government. Do you expect a partial sanctions relief for Damascus?
I do. I think sanctions relief is going to need to come soon. Still, Washington's a little bit hesitant because it's not sure whether or not Mr. al-Shara will be able to consolidate power and lose control to extremists. But I think that will come. Washington is not yet ready. What's really important, though, about the outcome of this meeting yesterday when it comes to Syria is that both foreign ministers and their ministries have announced afterward that the countries agreed to work together in Syria. The United States readouts said that they agreed to work together to prevent Syria from becoming a source of terrorism or Iranian stable. Whereas on the Turkish side, I think the main concern is that the United States stop working with the YPG terrorist organization.
As we understood from the readout of the meeting, discussions also covered the ongoing Azerbaijani-Armenian peace progress process and concurrent Turkish-Armenian normalization efforts, with Washington requesting Ankara's support for peace in the South Caucasus. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's correct. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that. What that shows is that the Trump administration and Secretary of State Rubio remain committed, like the Biden administration was, to try to, to help Azerbaijan and Armenia finalize their peace treaty. Those two countries are very close. I hadn't heard Secretary Rubio talking about the South Caucasus, but I will say that his acting assistant secretary for Europe is the former Nagorno-Karabakh negotiator, by the way, as am I. So it's a good sign, and I think Turkey and the United States have a lot they can do together to help bring that peace treaty over the finish line between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Police intervened in authorized protests in Ankara against corruption and terror investigations into the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. One officer was injured and 34 demonstrators were detained. Protesters gathered in front of the Çankaya municipality building, chanting slogans and holding banners. Tensions escalated as police warned them to disperse, citing the presence of the provocateurs. When demonstrators threw stones and bottles, police responded with pressurized water. A similar protest at Middle East Technical University also saw police intervention as demonstrators blocked traffic. The Turkish Interior Minister earlier stated that authorities would not tolerate any attempts to disrupt public order or threaten national security. As the European Union continues its expansion discussions, one country's name was notably absent: Georgia. While Ukraine, Moldova and Western Balkans took center stage in European Council President Antonio Costa's remarks, Georgia's path in integration remains uncertain. With stalled reforms, political tensions and growing concerns over democratic backsliding, is Tbilisi losing its place on the EU's priority list?
European Council President Antonio Costa did not mention Georgia while discussing EU enlargement process during his speech in Brussels on March 25, instead emphasizing work with Ukraine, Moldova and Western Balkans. His omission raises questions about Georgia's standing in EU expansion process. Despite holding the candidate status, Georgia's European integration has stalled. The ruling Georgian Dream Party has delayed further progress until 2028, citing the need for internal reforms. However, critics argue that the government policies, including democratic backsliding and its strained relations with Brussels, have contributed to its exclusion of EU priorities. The opposition and civil society groups blame the government for deliberately slowing the integration process, warning that Georgia is risking falling behind other candidate status. While the EU has not altered its stance, Costa's remarks reflect a shift in focus towards the countries demonstrating actively engagement. With political tensions in Georgia high and uncertainty over its long-term European course, the coming months will be crucial for determining whether the country faces further distance from Brussels or regain the momentum. It's Nina Nikolashvili reporting from Tbilisi, News.
Joining us now live from Tbilisi, Georgia, is Victor Kipiani, chairman of the GOK think tank. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Kipiani.
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
European Council President Antonio Costa's latest speech on the EU's enlargement did not make any reference to Georgia, which is technically still a candidate country. What are your thoughts?
Which is quite unpleasant, but not surprising, to be honest with you. This is a long story which to be told in a very short way. Before the fall last year, we came across a statement by the European Union, which said that Georgia is not in a position to fulfill the 9 conditions for opening the accession talks. We had the same statement, effectively the same statement by the Georgian government, which said that the EU talks, the EU agenda would be suspended until 2028. Which means that effectively the EU on its side and Georgia has got to this stoppage. And that's where we're now. So again, what you just stated, it came as no surprise to us.
What are the alternatives for Georgia? Will the government pursue a more regionalist foreign policy?
Well, the roadmap is there. That roadmap is about committing or fulfilling actually those 9 conditions, which could be the way for opening the accession talk. And but unfortunately, so far as a passage of time, we've not seen any improvement. The opposite. Very robust rhetorics by the ruling party, Georgian Dream, effectively put the process to the deadlock. And at the same time, we also say that the European Union is not willing to concede. So unless it's a change and unless some very speedy actions which would bring up Georgia's compliance with the EU's foreign and security policy to the desired level for opening accession talks, any expectations.
The Armenian parliament has approved the draft law on initiating the process of the Republic of Armenia's accession to the European Union. The civil contract faction backed the bill with 64 votes, while the opposition was split. One faction voted against and another abstained. The government also revised the warning, removing a reference to the will of the people and emphasized democratic development, security as a rule of law. However, Deputy Foreign Minister Parur Hovhannisyan clarified that this does not yet mean Armenia is officially applying for European Union membership. Over the past year, Armenia's trade with Russia has surged, growing 1.6 times to $11.7 billion by the end of 2024, with Russia now making up over 40% of Armenia's total trade. This partnership is strengthening, but it also raises serious geopolitical questions.
Trade between Russia and Armenia has surged, growing 1.6 times to $11.7 billion by the end of 2024. Russia now accounts for over 40% of Armenia's total trade, strengthening economic ties, but also raising concerns about possible sanctions risks. Russian Minister of Economic Development Maxim Reshetnikov reports that Russian investment in Armenia has reached $4 billion, making Russian businesses key contributors to Armenia's economy. During the first half of 2024 alone, Russia's share in the Armenian foreign trade increased from 36% to 44.4%. Interestingly, during the same period, Russian exports to Armenia increased by 4.4 times, reaching $7.5 billion. However, Armenia's increasing trade with Russia has raised Western concerns. With Russia facing sanctions, Armenia is seen as a potential transit hub for restricted goods, dual-use technologies, and financial transactions. Western officials worry that Armenia might be helping Russia bypass sanctions, which could lead to greater scrutiny or penalties from the US and the EU. Some experts are concerned that heavy reliance on Russia could put Armenia at risk. If Western countries impose secondary sanctions on nations aiding Russia, Armenia may have to balance its trade with Russia and its ties with the West.
Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has been sworn for the 7th term during a ceremony in Minsk.
Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko was sworn in for a 7th term on Tuesday during a ceremony held at the Ceremonial Hall of the Palace of Independence in Minsk. The event, which was attended by more than 1,100 guests, included a formal presentation of the national flag and the presidential standard just before Lukashenko's arrival. Lukashenko's re-election was confirmed after the 26th of January presidential election, where he secured more than 5.1 million votes, representing nearly 87% of the total votes cast. The 70-year-old president has been in power since 1994.
Kyrgyzstan has officially ratified a key border treaty with Tajikistan. The move marks a significant step toward resolving a century-long border dispute between the two nations. The two countries had been in disagreement for over 500 street kilometers of their approximately 970-kilometer border.
President Sadir Japarov of Kyrgyzstan has signed a law ratifying the treaty on the Kyrgyz-Tajik state border, which was agreed upon with Tajikistan on March 13th in Bishkek. According to the Presidential Press Service, Kyrgyzstan's Supreme Council approved the law on March 19th. The law was created to officially define the Kyrgyz-Tajik border and complete the necessary state procedures for recognizing and ratifying the treaty. The establishment of a legal framework between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan aims to ensure stability and security, improve conditions for citizens, especially in border regions, and strengthen socio-economic and humanitarian cooperation, the presidential administration stated. On March 13th, President Sadir Japarov and Emomali Rahmon held a bilateral meeting in Bishkek. Following their talks, they signed the treaty on the delimitation and demarcation of the Kyrgyz-Tajik border. The border issue between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan has been going on since 1924, with the two countries repeatedly clashing. Thousands of people have been killed in conflicts along the border in the past 30 years. This agreement would settle issues related to nearly 500 kilometers of frontiers. It also includes clauses stipulating mutual access to water and energy facilities along the border.
Thanks for joining us. Keep watching A News for the latest, and we'll be back before you know it.